Philanthropy.
Philanthropy etymologically means love of humanity in the sense of caring, nourishing, developing and enhancing what it is to be human on both the benefactors and beneficiaries parts. The most conventional modern definition is private initiatives, for public good, focusing on quality of life. This combines the social scientific aspect developed in the 20th century with the original humanistic tradition, and serves to contrast philanthropy with business and government. Instances of philanthropy commonly overlap with instances of charity, though not all charity is philanthropy, or vice versa. The difference commonly cited is that charity relieves the pains of social problems, whereas philanthropy attempts to solve those problems at their root causes. The difference between giving a hungry man a fish, and teaching him how to fish for himself. A person who practices philanthropy is called a philanthropist.
Etymology.
The word was first coined as an adjective by the playwright Aeschylus in Prometheus Bound, 5th century BC, to describe Prometheus' character as humanity-loving, philanthropo, for having given to the earliest proto-humans who had no culture, fire, symbolizing technological civilization, and blind hope, optimism. Together, they would be used to improve the human condition, to save mankind from destruction. Thus humans were distinguished from all other animals by civilization the power to complete their own creation through education, self-development, and culture, civic development, expressed in good works benefiting others. The new word, philanthropo, combined two words, philos, loving in the sense of benefiting, caring for, nourishing, and anthropo, human being in the sense of humanity, or humanness. The first use of the noun form philanthropia came shortly thereafter, circa 390 BC, in the early Platonic dialogue Euthyphro. Socrates is reported to have said that his pouring out of his thoughts freely, without charge, to his listeners was his philanthropia. The Philosophical Dictionary of the Platonic Academy defined philanthropia as a state of well-educated habits stemming from love of humanity. A state of being productive of benefit to humans. A state of grace. Mindfulness together with good works. Philanthropia, loving humanity, was thought to be the essence of civilization. The ancient Greek word for culture as education was paideia. In the 1st century BC, both paideia and philanthropia were translated into Latin by the single word humanitas, which was also understood to be the core of liberal education studia humanitatis, the studies of humanity, or simply the humanities. In the 2nd century AD, Plutarch used the concept of philanthropia to describe superior human beings. This classically synonymous troika, of philanthropy, the humanities, and liberal education, declined with the fall of Rome. During the Middle Ages philanthropia was superseded by caritas, charity, selfless love, valued for salvation. In the 19th century, the word philanthropy, and its variants tended to drift in meaning and importance, and came to be associated with doing good. In the late 20th century, the word philanthropy came to be associated exclusively with its most conspicuous manifestations, foundations and grant-making. Professional fundraisers stopped using the word as it was considered as unnecessarily pretentious and pompous. However, use of the word has seen a modest revival in recent years.
History. Philanthropy.
The ancient Greek view of philanthropy, that the love of what it is to be human is the essential nature and purpose of humanity, culture and civilization, was intrinsically philosophical, containing both metaphysics and ethics. The Greeks adopted the love of humanity as an educational ideal, whose goal was excellence, arete, the fullest self-development, of body, mind, and spirit, which is the essence of liberal education. The Platonic Academy's Philosophical Dictionary defined philanthropia as a state of well-educated habits stemming from love of humanity. A state of being productive of benefit to humans. Just as Prometheus' human empowering gifts rebelled against the tyranny of Zeus, philanthropia was also associated with freedom and democracy. Both Socrates and the laws of Athens were described as philanthropic and democratic. The total economic collapse attending the fall of Rome and leading to the Dark Ages dissolved classical civilization, replacing it with Christian theology and soteriology, administered through the Roman Catholic Church's ecclesiastical and monastic infrastructures. Gradually there emerged a non-religious agricultural infrastructure based on peasant farming organized into manors, which were in turn organized for law and order by feudalism. For 1,000 years classical humanism hibernated in forgotten manuscripts of monastic libraries. When it was rediscovered in the Italian Renaissance, humanism consisted of a specific academic curriculum, grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, and moral philosophy, or ethics, designed to train laymen for effective leadership in business, law, and government. One of the clearest literary expressions of Renaissance humanist philosophy is Pico della Mirandola's famous 15th-century oration on the dignity of man, which echoes the philanthropic myth of human creation, though with the Christian God as the Promethean creator. Sir Francis Bacon in 1592 wrote in a letter that his vast contemplative ends expressed his philanthropia, and his 1608 essay on goodness defined his subject as the effecting of the weal of men. What the Grecians call philanthropia. Henry Cocker, in his English Dictionary, 1623, cited philanthropy as a synonym for humanity, in Latin, humanitas, thus reaffirming the classical formulation.
Modern philanthropy.
Philanthropy began to reach its modern form in the Age of Enlightenment, after the wars of religion in 17th-century Europe. Secular alternatives such as rationalism, empiricism and science, inclined philosophers toward a more progressive view of history. This tendency achieved an especially pure articulation in the Scottish Enlightenment, especially in the works of Anthony Ashley Cooper, 3rd Earl of Shaftesbury, and Francis Hutcheson, who proposed that philanthropy is the essential key to human happiness, conceived as a kind of fitness, living in harmony with nature and one's own circumstances. Self-development, manifested in good deeds toward others, was the surest way to live a pleasing, fulfilling, and satisfying life, as well as to help build a commonwealth community. Influenced by these ideas, and as a facet of the expansion of civil society, charitable and philanthropic activity among voluntary associations and rich benefactors became a widespread cultural practice. Societies, gentlemen's clubs and mutual associations began to flourish in England, and the upper classes increasingly adopted a philanthropic attitude towards the disadvantaged. This new social activism was channeled into the establishment of charitable organizations. These proliferated from the middle of the century. This emerging upper-class fashion for benevolence resulted in the incorporation of the first charitable organizations. Captain Thomas Coram, appalled by the number of abandoned children living on the streets of London, set up the Foundling Hospital in 1741 to look after these unwanted orphans in Lamb's Conduit Fields, Bloomsbury. This was the first such charity in the world and served as the precedent for incorporated associational charities everywhere. Jonas Hanway, another notable philanthropist of the era, established the Marine Society in 1756 as the first seafarers' charity, in a bid to aid the recruitment of men to the Navy. By 1763, the society had recruited over 10,000 men, and it was incorporated by an Act of Parliament in 1772. Hanway was also instrumental in establishing the Magdalen Hospital to rehabilitate prostitutes. These organizations were funded by subscription and run as voluntary associations. They raised public awareness of their activities through the emerging popular press and were generally held in high social regard. Some charities received state recognition in the form of the Royal Charter. Philanthropists, such as anti-slavery campaigner William Wilberforce, began to adopt active campaigning roles, where they would champion a cause and lobby the government for legislative change. This included organized campaigns against the ill treatment of animals and children, and a campaign that eventually succeeded in ending the slave trade throughout the British Empire at the turn of the 19th century. During the 19th century, a profusion of charitable organizations was set up to alleviate the awful conditions of the working class in the slums. The Labourers' Friend Society, chaired by Lord Shaftesbury in the United Kingdom in 1830, was set up to improve working class conditions. This included the promotion of allotment of land to laborers for cottage husbandry that later became the allotment movement. In 1844 it became the first model dwellings company, organizations that sought to improve the housing conditions of the working classes by building new homes for them, at the same time receiving a competitive rate of return on any investment. This was one of the first housing associations, a philanthropic endeavor that flourished in the second half of the 19th century brought about by the growth of the middle class. Later associations included the Peabody Trust and the Guinness Trust. The principle of philanthropic intention with capitalist return was given the label 5% philanthropy. Henry Dunant, the Swiss businessman, from his own personal fortune, he founded the Geneva Society for Public Welfare in 1863, which became the International Committee of the Red Cross. During the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, Dunant personally led Red Cross delegations that treated soldiers and won the first Nobel Prize in 1901. Philanthropy became a very fashionable activity among the expanding middle classes in Britain and America. Octavia Hill and John Ruskin were an important force behind the development of social housing, and Andrew Carnegie exemplified the large-scale philanthropy of the newly rich in industrialized America. In Gospel of Wealth, 1889, Carnegie wrote about the responsibilities of great wealth and the importance of social justice. He established public libraries throughout the English-speaking countries as well as contributing large sums to schools and universities. Other American philanthropists of the early 20th century were John D. Rockefeller and Ford. The sheer size of their endowments directed their attention to addressing the causes and instruments, as distinct from the symptoms and expressions, of social problems and cultural opportunities. In recent decades, wealth creators in new high-tech sectors have turned to second careers in philanthropy at earlier ages, creating large foundations. Individual philanthropy began to be chic, attracting celebrities from popular arts. Commercial movies and television adopted the idea, and many initiatives have been led by wealthy individuals such as Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. Nonetheless, according to studies by the Chronicle of Philanthropy, the rich, those making over $100,000 a year, give a smaller share, averaging 4.2%, to charity than those poorer, between $50,000-$75,000 a year, who give an average of 7.6%.
Modern philanthropy.
Philanthropy has been affected in various ways by technological and cultural change. Today, many donations are made through the Internet. See also donation statistics. Organizations like Opportunity International and Kieva, Microlending, Raise 5, Micro-volunteering, or Caritigic, micro-donating, leverage crowdfunding philanthropy to raise money for charity. Global giving allows individuals to crowdfund community development projects in low-income countries. Give Directly facilitates direct cash transfers to individual low-income households in East Africa. Zdashare is a non-profit person-to-person microlending website which uses an eBay-style marketplace to allow individuals in developing countries to crowd-fund loans from individual web users worldwide. Vitana is an online platform that allows low-income youth in developing countries to crowd-fund tuition for higher education. Charity evaluators, like Javul and Charity Navigator, have emerged, which assess charities in various ways to help prospective donors make their choice.
Some large individual bequests.
Note: these are nominal values and have not been adjusted for inflation. $31 billion from Warren Buffett to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, initial value of the gift, $9 billion from Chuck Feeney to Atlantic Philanthropies, $2 billion from Azim Premji to the Azim Premji Foundation in 2010, $1 billion from Ted Turner to the United Nations, $540 million from John D. Rockefeller to the Rockefeller Foundation and various other Rockefeller charities, over the course of his life, $500 million from T. Boone Pickens to Oklahoma State University, $500 million from Walter Annenberg to public school reform in the United States, $350 million, $7 billion in modern terms, from Andrew Carnegie in 1901, who distributed most of his wealth to good causes, including the building Carnegie Hall, New York City, $424 million from managers of the Reader's Digest fortune to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, $350 million from Michael Jackson, who distributed most of his wealth to good causes, and who supported over 39 charity organizations. He was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most charities supported by a pop star. $350 million from Yank Barry and his Global Village champions in food, education and medical supplies to the needy around the world from 1990 to the present. $225 million from Raymond and Ruth Perelman, parents of Ronald O. Perelman, to the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine in 2011. $200 million from Joan B. Kroc to National Public Radio in 2003. $220 million from Phil and Penny Knight, co-founder of Nike, to Oregon Health and Science University. $100 million from Mark Zuckerberg to Mayor Cory Booker for the Newark, New Jersey Public Schools. $100 million from Henry and Betty Rowan to Glassboro State College. Millions from Charles T. Hine to undertake various projects in Southern California from 1895 to 1915.
Use in popular culture.
Philanthropy is the name of the anti-Metal Gear NGO in the Metal Gear Solid games